So, you just got the promotion you worked 3 years for, the email lands in your inbox, you stare at it, and instead of feeling happy, you feel this strange creeping dread, or maybe it's simpler than that. Your relationship is going really well, like really well. No drama, no arguments, and somehow that terrifies you more than a fight ever would. Or maybe you've noticed this about yourself. Anytime something genuinely good happens, you immediately start waiting for it to fall apart. Like happiness itself is a trap. Like joy is just the universe setting you up for something worse. Here's what nobody tells you about that feeling. It has a name, it's called cherophobia, and it is far more common than you think. In fact, there's a solid chance that either you have it or someone you love does. And the reason nobody talks about it is because it sounds almost ridiculous on the surface, right? Who would be afraid of being happy? But that question, that exact question, is the reason so many people suffer with this in complete silence. Because they don't even realize it's a thing. They just think something is wrong with them. Today, we're going to fix that. By the end of this video, you are going to understand why this happens, where it actually comes from, what it looks like in everyday life, and most importantly, what it means for you or for someone you love. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share completely changes the way you'll see this. And honestly, it might change the way you see yourself. Now, most people who've heard of cherophobia think it's just anxiety or depression, or maybe just pessimism dressed up with a fancy name. That's the common belief. And look, I get it, on the surface, it seems like a stretch. Fear of happiness? Sounds like someone being dramatic. But here's the thing, the psychology behind this is actually wild. Because cherophobia isn't about hating happiness. It's about what the brain has learned happiness means. And once you understand that, everything changes. The behavior that looks irrational becomes completely logical. The person who pushes away good things, you'll understand exactly why they do it. And if that person is you, you're going to walk away from this video seeing yourself completely differently. So let's start at the very beginning. Because to understand the fear of happiness, you first have to understand what the brain is actually doing when something good happens. And trust me, the science here is going to surprise you. Cherophobia is defined as a persistent, irrational resistance to happiness or joy. But here's the first thing you need to know. It's not that these people want to be miserable. That is the biggest misconception. Nobody wakes up and decides, you know what? Today I'm going to reject every good thing that comes my way. It doesn't work like that. And calling it irrational, while technically accurate, actually misses the whole point, because from the inside, from their perspective, avoiding happiness makes complete sense. Think about it this way. Imagine you touched a hot stove as a kid, burned your hand badly. Now every time you walk past a stove, even a cold one, even one that's completely off, something in you pulls back. Your brain builds a connection. Stove equals pain. Cherophobia works on the exact same psychological wiring, except the stove, in this case, is joy. Psychologists describe this as conditioned emotional responses. Your brain at some point experienced happiness, and then experienced loss, pain, or punishment directly after that happiness. And over time, your brain did exactly what it's designed to do. It built a protective system. It learned happiness comes before the fall. And here's what makes this so fascinating and so heartbreaking at the same time. The person isn't broken. Their brain is doing exactly what a healthy brain is supposed to do. It saw a pattern. It protected them from getting hurt again. The problem is, the protection became the prison. Now, before we go deeper, because we're going to go much deeper, it's important to separate cherophobia from a few things it often gets confused with. It is not the same as depression. Depression is a clinical condition where the brain's chemistry makes it very difficult to feel pleasure or motivation at all. With cherophobia, the capacity for joy is still completely intact. In fact, many cherophobics can feel happiness. They just immediately start undermining it, minimizing it, running from it. It is not the same as chronic pessimism. A pessimist believes bad things will happen. A cherophobic believes good things are dangerous. Those are very different psychological mechanisms, and they lead to very different behaviors. And it is not just being a realist or being cautious. There is a meaningful difference between thoughtful caution and actively avoiding or sabotaging positive experiences. One is wisdom, the other is fear wearing a costume. Cherophobia is specific. It is a trained fear response. And like all fear responses, it started somewhere. Which brings us to the part that's going to hit harder than anything else in this video. Where does it actually come from? There's a phrase in psychology you need to know. It's called emotional contingency learning. It's a complicated term for a simple idea. Your brain learns what things mean based on what comes after them. If every time you were happy as a child, something bad followed, a parent's mood changed, an argument broke out, something was taken away, your brain didn't file that under bad luck, it filed it under pattern, and patterns are how the brain survives. Let me paint you a picture that might feel uncomfortably familiar. You're 8 years old, you come home from school, excited. You got a good grade, or your best friend invited you over for the weekend, and you're buzzing with it. And the second you walk through that door, you can feel the tension in the room. A parent is stressed, or angry, or checked out. And your happiness in that moment, your loud, joyful energy makes things worse. Maybe you get snapped at. Maybe your joy becomes the thing that sets off the argument. Maybe you're told you're being too much. Over time, your brain does the math. Happiness in this environment is a liability. And so, you learn to flatten yourself, to walk through the door a little quieter, to check the emotional weather before you let yourself feel anything. And that flatness, that muting of yourself, becomes second nature so quickly that you stop noticing you're doing it. This is one of the most common roots of cherophobia. Childhood environments where joy felt unsafe, where being visibly happy attracted negative attention, where the emotional climate of the home was so unpredictable that the safest thing to do was to stay neutral, don't get too high, don't celebrate too loud, because if you do, something will come to knock it down now. This doesn't have to be dramatic trauma. I want to say that clearly, because a lot of people hear childhood root and they immediately think, well, nothing terrible happened to me, so this can't be my issue. But it doesn't have to be terrible, it just has to be repeated. A parent who was emotionally unpredictable. A home where good news was always met with "don't get too excited." A religion or cultural message that taught you pride comes before a fall, so you should never fully enjoy your blessings. A sibling dynamic where your success triggered someone else's pain or your parents' frustration. These are quiet, ordinary things, and every single one of them can wire a brain to distrust happiness. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because childhood is only one road in. There are other ways this fear gets built, and some of them happen in adulthood. Loss after happiness. This is a big one. Some people didn't grow up with this pattern at all. They were genuinely happy, free, open people, and then something happened. A relationship ended right when it felt perfect. A business they poured everything into failed at its peak. Someone they loved deeply died during what should have been the best season of their life. The brain doesn't just grieve the loss, it draws a conclusion. This is what happens when you let yourself be happy. And from that moment forward, joy becomes a risk they are not willing to take again. Not consciously, not as a decision they made, just as a quiet closing of the door. Think about how profound that is for a second. Someone can be completely psychologically healthy for 30 years, go through one catastrophic loss that came right on the heels of their greatest happiness, and their whole relationship with joy shifts permanently, without them even realizing it happened. That is how much power the brain gives to the timing of pain. Not just the pain itself, the timing. Cultural and social conditioning. This one doesn't get talked about enough. In many cultures, expressing happiness openly is actually discouraged. There's a concept in some Eastern European and Middle Eastern cultures called the evil eye, the deeply held idea that displaying joy or good fortune invites jealousy or punishment, sometimes supernatural. In many East Asian cultures, emotional restraint is considered mature and wise. In certain religious frameworks, suffering is seen as virtuous and happiness as indulgent, even dangerous to the soul. These aren't pathological beliefs on their own. Cultures build these ideas for reasons, but when they're absorbed deeply enough, they create a subconscious equation. Happiness is dangerous, happiness is selfish, happiness will be punished, and the person who grew up in that framework carries it into every good moment they ever have, without knowing they're doing it. Survivor's guilt. Some people develop cherophobia because they feel, on a very deep level, that they don't deserve to be happy. Maybe they survived something that others didn't. Maybe people around them are suffering, a sick parent, a struggling friend, a difficult community, and every time they feel genuine joy, it comes immediately followed by guilt. A voice that says, "How dare you feel good right now," when they're hurting? And guilt is a powerful teacher. The brain learns to cut happiness short before the guilt arrives, or to avoid it altogether, so the guilt never gets a chance to show up. Perfectionism and conditional worth. Here's one people almost never connect to cherophobia. Some people grew up in environments where love and approval were conditional, where they were praised when they performed and ignored or criticized when they didn't, where being enough was always tied to achieving something. For these people, happiness without earning it feels wrong, viscerally wrong. There's always a voice asking, "What did you do to deserve this?" And if they can't answer that question, the happiness feels fraudulent, like something they'll have to give back. All of these paths lead to the same place, a nervous system that has built a thick, heavy wall between itself and joy, not out of weakness, out of self-protection. And here's the part I really need you to hear. This was smart once. This was the brain doing its job, protecting you in an environment where joy really did come with a cost. The tragedy is that the environment changed, and the wall didn't come down with it. So now you know what it is and where it comes from. But here's the section that I think is going to hit the hardest, because this is where you're going to start recognizing yourself or someone you love in real everyday life. What does cherophobia actually look like in everyday life? Because it doesn't always look like someone running away from happiness. Sometimes it's a lot quieter than that. Sometimes it's almost invisible until you know what to look for. Sign number 1, catastrophizing good news. Someone calls you to say they got you tickets to the thing you've been wanting to see for months, And instead of just feeling excited, your brain immediately starts running scenarios. What if something goes wrong? What if I don't enjoy it as much as I thought? What if we get in an accident on the way? What if I'm reading too much into this and it falls apart? This isn't just anxiety. This is the brain trying to reduce the height of the happiness, so the fall isn't as far. If you can't let yourself fully enjoy something, you can't be fully devastated when it disappears. That's the logic. It's protecting you by keeping you low. Sign number 2, self-sabotage at the peak. This one is genuinely wild when you see it in yourself. Everything is going well. The relationship is great. The job is solid. You feel genuinely content, and then, almost without meaning to, you do something to mess it up. You start an unnecessary fight. You pick at something that was fine. You push someone away for no reasons you can explain. You quit when you're ahead. Psychologists call this approach avoidance conflict. The closer you get to something deeply good, the more the fear activates. The nervous system starts reading the depth of the happiness as proportional danger, and it finds a way to create distance, even if it has to burn something down to do it. And the worst part, the person usually doesn't realize they did it, they explain it away, they blame the other person, they call it just how I am, and the pattern repeats, because the brain never learned that the explosion was self-inflicted. Sign number 3, guilt when things are going well. You're having a genuinely good day and it feels wrong. Like you shouldn't be allowed to feel this good. Like being happy means you're forgetting something important, neglecting a problem you should be worried about, or being somehow disloyal to the struggle. This guilt isn't random. It's the brain's way of pulling you back to a state it considers safe, which is neutral or slightly negative, not joyful. And over time, guilt becomes the mechanism that cuts happiness short before it can fully land. Sign number 4, refusing to celebrate achievements. You finish the project. You hit the milestone, and instead of stopping to actually feel good about it, you immediately move to the next problem, or you minimize it. It's not that big a deal. I got lucky. Anyone could have done it. People around you want to celebrate for you, and you feel almost irritated by it, like they're embarrassing you, like they're setting you up for disappointment. This is extremely common in people with cherophobia. Celebration feels like tempting fate, like holding something up high just so the universe knows what to take from you. Sign number 5, choosing suffering over uncertainty. This is one of the most counterintuitive signs and one of the most important. Given a choice between staying in a difficult but familiar situation and moving towards something potentially wonderful but unknown, the cherophobic chooses the familiar suffering consistently, reliably every time, and people around them cannot understand it. They think, why would someone choose to stay miserable? But that's the wrong question. The right question is, what does the misery offer that the potential happiness doesn't? And the answer is certainty. Suffering, for the cherophobic, is predictable, and predictable is safe. Joy is unpredictable, and unpredictable, because of everything we've already talked about, is dangerous. Sign number 6, pushing people away when the relationship gets good. This is the one that does the most damage to relationships, and the person doing it almost never understands why they keep doing it. The relationship reaches a new level of depth. There's genuine love, genuine security, genuine closeness, and something in them panics. They go cold, they pick fights that don't need to happen. They create distance through criticism, withdrawal, or cruelty they can't quite explain even to themselves. Because here's the truth. Deep connection means there's more to lose. And more to lose means more potential pain. And the brain would rather create the distance now while it's in control than have that distance created later by something it didn't see coming. It's not about not loving the person. It's about the brain deciding that loving this much is too expensive. Sign number 7, feeling like you don't deserve happiness. This is the quietest one. The one that runs in the background like white noise, so constant you stop hearing it consciously. Every time something good happens, there's a whisper underneath it. You don't deserve this. This isn't really for you. This is going to be taken away because you haven't earned it yet. And the person lives with that voice for so long and so quietly that they just feel a low persistent unease whenever life is going well. A vague, unnamed tension, like waiting for the other shoe to drop. And they call it being realistic. They call it not jinxing it. But what's really happening is the brain protecting them from a happiness it doesn't believe they're allowed to keep. Now, here's the question that matters. If you recognize yourself in any of those, or someone you love, what do you actually do with that? Because understanding the signs is only half of it. The other half is understanding what's actually happening inside the brain when this plays out. And once you see that, you'll understand why the healing works the way it does. Let's go there. Let's talk about what's actually going on neurologically. Because once you understand the mechanism, the behavior stops looking like a character flaw and starts looking like exactly what it is, a system doing its job badly in the wrong context. There's a part of your brain called the amygdala. Think of it as your internal alarm system. Its job is to scan the environment for threats and signal the body to respond. It doesn't think, it doesn't reason, it reacts fast. In people with cherophobia, the amygdala has been trained through repeated experience to treat happiness as a threat signal. So when something good happens, instead of the brain releasing a clean wave of dopamine, the feel-good chemical, the amygdala fires first, and the body goes into a low-level version of fight or flight. That tight feeling in your chest when things are going too well, that restless, unsettled sensation when you should feel peaceful, that's not weakness. That is a trained survival response misfiring. There's also something called anticipatory anxiety. The brain doesn't just respond to things that are happening right now, it predicts the future based on past patterns. And for a cherophobic, the prediction is always the same. Good things end, joy is temporary, pain is coming. So the brain tries to fast forward past the joy to get to the pain it's already expecting. It's bracing for impact before the crash has even happened, which means the person is already managing the emotional fallout of a loss that hasn't occurred yet. They're grieving something they still have. Let that land for a second. They are grieving something they still have. That is the cost of this. You spend the best moments of your life already preparing for them to end. You can't be fully present inside your own happiness because your brain is already standing outside of it, looking at it from a distance, calculating how much it's going to hurt when it's gone. And here's the cruel irony. This mechanism, this constant anticipation of loss, actually causes more suffering than the loss itself would. The person spends so much time dreading the end of good things that they barely experience the good things in the first place. Research published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology found that people who consistently resist positive emotions report significantly lower well-being over time than people who simply allow themselves to feel joy and let it pass naturally, not because happiness is taken from them more often, but because they never fully let themselves have it to begin with. The brain is incredibly efficient, but efficiency without self-awareness becomes its own kind of prison. So with all of that, the roots, the signs, the neuroscience, let's get to the section I know you've been waiting for. What does healing from this actually look like? I want to be honest with you here, and I want to say something that most psychology content doesn't say. There is no hack for this. There is no do these 3 things and cherophobia is fixed. And honestly, anyone who tells you otherwise isn't respecting how real and how deep this goes. What there is a genuine pathway, and it's not complicated, but it's not easy either. And the difference between knowing it and doing it is where most people get stuck. So let's walk through it carefully. Step 1, name it specifically, not as a flaw, not as a diagnosis, not as something broken in you, but as a learned response, a survival strategy. The brain doing the best it could with what it had. Because the moment you can look at this pattern, really look at it and say, my brain learned to distrust happiness because happiness wasn't safe. You take it from a mysterious force that controls you to a mechanism you can actually work with. That shift is everything. It's the difference between I am broken and I was protected. Both can be true at the same time, and only one of them gives you somewhere to go. Step 2, learn to sit with joy, not manage it, not escape it, sit with it. This sounds almost offensively simple, but hear me out. The nervous system is trainable. Just like it learned to associate happiness with danger, it can learn, slowly, with repetition, to associate happiness with safety. This is what therapists who work with this call positive affect tolerance training, which is a fancy way of saying practice letting good things feel good without immediately trying to manage them, minimize them, or escape them. Something good happens, notice it, say it out loud if you have to. This is good. I'm going to let this be good for a minute. And this is the part that takes practice, don't immediately follow it with a but. Don't immediately start scanning for what could go wrong. Don't immediately qualify it or minimize it. Just let it breathe. It will feel uncomfortable. That discomfort is not a warning sign. That discomfort is the nervous system recalibrating. That is the actual work. You're not failing when it feels uncomfortable. You're succeeding. You're doing the exact thing your brain needed you to stop doing. Think of it this way. You've been holding your breath around happiness your whole life. Learning to breathe around it again is going to feel strange at first, but strange isn't dangerous. Strange is just new. Step 3, interrupt the catastrophizing loop in real time. When good news arrives and your brain immediately starts running worst case scenarios, the intervention is not to force yourself to think positive. Forced positivity on top of fear doesn't work. The brain sees right through it. The intervention is to slow the loop down. And you do that with one question. Is this thought a fact right now, or is this my brain doing what it was trained to do? That single question creates a gap. And in that gap is where your rational mind can step in. Not to override the fear, again, that doesn't work, but to sit beside it and say, I see you. I know why you're here. And we don't have to act on this right now. Therapists use a framework called cognitive behavioral therapy for exactly this, and the research on it for anxiety-based fear responses is strong and consistent. If you see yourself in this video, working with a therapist is not a sign that something is wrong with you. It is a sign that you understand yourself well enough to get the right tool for what you're dealing with. Step 4, address the relationships this has damaged. This one is hard, but it's necessary. Cherophobia doesn't live in a vacuum. It shows up in every close relationship you have, and the people closest to you, the ones you've pushed away at the peak, the ones you've picked fights with for no reason they could understand, the ones you've kept at arm's length when they were trying to love you. They were casualties of a war they didn't even know you were fighting. You don't have to have the perfect conversation. You don't have to explain the whole psychology. But being honest with the people who matter about the fact that you've been afraid of the very things you wanted most, that honesty is healing in itself for you and for them. And it also does something powerful for the nervous system. Because when you can say, this is what I've been doing, and this is why, you break the pattern of secrecy around it. And shame needs secrecy to survive. When the pattern is named out loud, in connection with another person, it loses some of its power. Step 5, grieve what this cost you. This is possibly the most important step and the one most people skip. Because what many people with cherophobia are actually carrying underneath the avoidance, underneath the self-sabotage, underneath the armor is a profound and unprocessed grief. Grief for the joy they had and ran from. Grief for the connections they kept at a distance. Grief for the version of themselves that learned very early that it wasn't safe to want good things. You have to grieve that, not wallow in it, not use it as a reason to stay stuck, but genuinely sit with the sadness of, I have been spending my life protecting myself from the things I wanted most, and that cost me something real. That grief needs to be felt, not intellectualized, not analyzed, felt, because unprocessed grief keeps the nervous system on alert. And a nervous system on alert cannot receive joy. It can't. The two states are physiologically incompatible. When you grieve what this took from you, the nervous system begins to believe that the danger has passed, that you've looked at it, that you've honored it, and that it doesn't need to keep protecting you from something that's already been faced. And here's the thing I want you to hold on to. The same brain that built this wall can build a door. The patterns that were learned can be unlearned, not erased. That's not how the brain works, but overlaid, updated, given new information that changes what happiness means. You are not sentenced to a life of muted joy. The fact that you're even watching this, that you've sat with this for 20 something minutes and let it land, that's already the brain doing something different. That's already a crack in the wall. I want to end with something that I think is the most important idea in this entire video. And it's this: cherophobia underneath everything is not a fear of happiness. It is a form of love. It is the self trying to protect the self. It is a brain that cares enough about its person to say, I have been hurt before. I will not let that happen again. It is fierce, loyal, devoted self-protection. It just got its wires crossed. It learned to protect you from the very thing that could heal you. And when you understand it that way, not as a defect, not as dysfunction, not as something shameful, but as your own nervous system doing everything it knew how to do to keep you safe, something shifts. You stop fighting yourself. You start working with yourself. The goal isn't to become someone who is recklessly, blindly happy. It's to become someone who can hold happiness and vulnerability at the same time, who can say, this might not last forever, and I'm going to let it matter right now anyway. That is not naivety. That is one of the bravest things a human being can do. If this hit home for you today, if you saw yourself in this, or you saw someone you love, please don't just scroll past it. Let it sit. Let it breathe. You don't have to have it all figured out today. You just have to be willing to look at it honestly. And you already are, because you're here. So, to bring everything together, we talked about what cherophobia actually is and what it isn't. We went into the real psychological roots: childhood emotional conditioning, loss after happiness, cultural messages, survivor's guilt, conditional worth. We walked through the 7 signs: the catastrophizing, the self-sabotage, the guilt, the refusing to celebrate, choosing known suffering, pushing people away, and the quiet voice that says, you don't deserve it. We looked at what's actually happening in the brain: the amygdala misfiring, the anticipatory anxiety, grieving things you still have. And we walked through the real path forward: naming it, sitting with joy, interrupting the loop, repairing relationships, and giving yourself permission to grieve. This is not a small topic, and you stayed with it the whole way through. That matters now. If what you just watched felt uncomfortably accurate, if the cherophobia piece landed hard, there is a very good chance the next video is going to hit you even harder.